Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alex Richmond, the Executive Director of Climate Beacon. Want to welcome everybody here today. Couldn't be more excited for the program that we're going to have in just a few minutes. I want to take just a couple minutes to thank a number of different people, companies and organizations that are making this possible for us. You know, we really are trying to build something here that's a community of people who want to look at solutions, want to look and be exposed to and learn and build their base of knowledge around what's possible when it comes to climate change, when it comes to sustainability, comes to building a more livable future. And you know, in that vein, we have an amazing steering committee that's been put together. They work really, really hard on at least bi-monthly basis at this point. I've been dragging them in more on a multiple times a week basis lately. So if the steering committee, if any members of the steering committee are here, could you just raise your hand? We also have some really amazing team members that make this thing happen behind the scenes for all of us. Mary Michelle and Joel Parra from M&M Elite Events, High Output, and Windwalker Security, the whole team that's come together. All of the food that you're having today is local food, local small businesses that are putting that together. Some amazing stories that you're seeing in the Climate Commons. So make sure you check all of that out. Want to thank Mass Art and Bowseat and Cool Science and El Recreo and One Big Island in Space, who have all come together along with CBT Architects to make the Climate Commons exactly what it is. I'll get to our other partner in that in just a second. But finally, I do want to thank the sponsors that have made this possible. Vineyard Offshore, Alicia Barton, Rick Musial, and the rest of the team there are presenting sponsors for this whole thing. And they really came to us and said, you know, we want to make Climate Beacon possible. We want to be there side by side as partners. And I just want to thank Vineyard Offshore for that. Our gold level sponsors, yeah, thank you. Our gold level sponsors, I just erased it in my notes, so hopefully I get everybody. But I want to thank the Bar Foundation. Bar Foundation is you know, the partner that makes it possible for us to make all of the tickets that are complimentary to this event complimentary. So it's important to them, it's important to us that we make that possible for students, for public leaders, for small nonprofits, environmental justice groups. This is supposed to be the audience that you're seeing right here. And so I want to thank the Bar Foundation for that. I want to thank Keolis, who has been a partner since day one, Abdullah Chajai, Sherry, and Alana, who all have come together. We have weekly calls. I don't think you get to have weekly calls with sponsors most of the time, but that's how engaged we're talking about with sponsors with this thing. CBT Architects, that has been really another one of our just day one sponsors. They, you know, make it possible. You just see some of their artwork inside. They work with us on programming on a daily basis. But David Nagahiro, Kishore Varanasi, Devanshi Purahit, Henry Chelly, and the rest of the team, just, you couldn't ask for better sponsors than CBT Architects. Avangrid, Pat Johnson, Pedro Azagra, Rachel Martin, and the whole team there. You know, again, when we talk about, you know, how do we program Climate Beacon, it's because people like Pat Johnson send us a list of 10 different experts from around the world that they'd be happy to bring in, right? It's really amazing. I want to thank, sorry, where did my slide go? Who am I missing? Sorry, everybody. Ooh, there they are. I couldn't forget them. So thank you to Argus Marketing. The team at Argus, Scott Zobak, Caitlin Dodge, Pete Valley, and Marie Rocket. So I literally have an office space in Argus, and we sit there, and every single day they come to us with more amazing ideas about what can make this thing more exciting. So just want to thank them for all that work. And then finally, the sponsor of this session, Amazon. Without Jen Cruikshank and Jerome Smith and Christina Fisher, we would not be able to put on this event. And with that, I want to bring up one of our amazing co-chairs of the steering committee to introduce the rest of the program. And so here's Kate Deneen from A Better City.
Thank you so much, Alex. And please, can we just give a round of applause for Alex Richmond, who is, as everyone knows, the driving force behind this entire conference, but also all of the additional programming that happens throughout the year around Climate Beacon. So it's not just a conference, and he is the man behind it all. So thank you, Alex. So it is my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Cruikshank. She is the Director of Public Policy, leading all of Amazon's state and local policy work for all of the Northeast and the Midwest. So she has a lot under her purview, a lot that's very relevant to the topics that we're going to talk about today. Prior to her work at Amazon, Jennifer worked at Coca-Cola in various capacities, and also she is an alum, like many of the folks in this audience, of the Menino administration. That's always a shout out, right? Where she managed all of the state efforts there for the Menino administration. So we're so lucky to have Jennifer here today. She does live in Long Island now, but she likes to come back frequently to Boston. And so I'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit more about the work of Amazon, and just thank you to Jennifer and Amazon for sponsoring this particular convening today.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, Boston. It's so great to be back home.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. Amazon pledged to be carbon neutral by 2040, but has only increased its fossil fuel use since and has failed to commit to a science-based target. When will Amazon phase out fossil fuels? When will Amazon phase out fossil fuels? Why are they speaking at a climate conference?
Okay, so we're going to ask you guys to leave, please.
Part of a just transition to clean energy is providing safe jobs and working conditions, but Amazon, a union buster.
We appreciate everybody's input. We have question and answer at every one of our sessions, and we do appreciate it, but we're going to ask you to leave. It is private property, so we're going to ask that everybody goes.
I'm just also wondering, when will Amazon stop?
And I'm sure that we can have a conversation outside, okay? So why don't we move now?
When will Amazon phase out fossil fuels?
Thank you. Thank you. We respect everybody's opinions, and as always, we would like.
We need them to take real action
Okay.
towards a future that we can all live with.
Okay.
Yes.
Right now, we're on a trajectory towards a future
Folks.
that we can't live on this planet.
We're going to ask you to leave now, okay?
Hey, Amazon,
Unless
get off
unless
it. Put people
you'd
over
like to be,
profit. Hey,
you will be trespassing.
Put people over profit.
You will be trespassing, or we'll ask you to leave.
Put people over profit. Hey, Amazon,
Where's
get
our
off
security?
it. Put people over profit. Hey, Amazon, get off it. Put people over profit. They also have no plans to divest. They also have no plans to
talk outside.
I will happily
talk outside.
And their external suppliers from fossil fuels, they have no.
Everywhere she goes, people like us should be there. Thank you.
Let me just. All right. With that, we're going to welcome Jen Cruikshank. Amazon, so everybody knows, has been an amazing partner to us. They and we believe in the same values, and we want to make sure that we're here to have that conversation. We're here sometimes to disagree, and that's okay, but we want to make sure we have that conversation in a respectful way. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to have Jen come up, then we're going to have a really respectful, wonderful conversation with the mayor.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you all. So as I was saying, Amazon is, we have got 4,500 employees at our Boston Tech Hub. We live here. We care about these communities. Even those of us who reluctantly live in New York care about Boston. And organizations like Climate Beacon and A Better City are part of that solution and are working hard every day to ensure that Boston remains a great community and city to live and work, not just for us, but for future generations. So I want to thank Alex, not just for being my bodyguard today, but also during my time in the Menino administration, and I'm dating us a little bit here, Alex was working for Governor Patrick, and we spent countless hours in random parking lots across the city waiting for our bosses to show up. So he was a great partner then, and I know that he's going to continue to be a proud partner of Amazon and the entire business community in this work. So at Amazon, we know we have a responsibility to the planet we all share. We know that climate change is real and serious, and we want to have a seat at the table in trying to mitigate the effects of the carbon that we use in our business. Here in Boston, we've invested in more than $1.2 million of 1.2 million square feet of office space in the Seaport and in the Fort Point Channel. It's in our interest to protect this neighborhood and all of Boston neighborhoods from the risks of climate change. In 2019, as you heard, we founded the Climate Pledge and committed to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040, a decade ahead of the Paris Climate Agreement. We set an ambitious goal to match 100% of the electricity we use with renewable energy by 2030. I'm really proud to share that we actually met that commitment last year, 7 years ahead of schedule, and are now matching all of the electricity consumed by Amazon with renewable energy sources. Another part of this effort for Amazon is decarbonizing our buildings, and that's critically important here in Boston and in the Seaport. Building construction and operations account for nearly 40% of global carbon emissions. Amazon has a diverse and complex real estate portfolio, fulfillment centers, grocery stores, data centers, corporate office buildings, and we're working hard to ensure that across that diverse portfolio, we're more sustainable. That means we're increasingly incorporating features like energy efficient systems and equipment, building materials that have lower levels of carbon, and we're working to reduce the amount of water we use, recycle, reuse more of the waste we generate, and preserve biodiversity around our sites. We've challenged ourselves to think creatively when it comes to sustainable building design. Our corporate office on Pier 5 is LED Gold certified, and our future office tower at 1 Boston Wharf Road will be Boston's largest net zero building, where Somerville startup Sublime Systems has its first commercial application of low carbon cement. So we're super proud of that, and we're super proud that that's happening right here in Boston. We're also encouraging our employees to do their part as well. As part of our flexible commuter subsidy, bike expenses are reimbursed, including the cost of bike leases, bike share, and even routine bike maintenance. Our on-site bike facilities include parking with access to showers and lockers on site, and transportation is obviously a key part of our plan to meet this net zero carbon goal by 2040 as well. I'm sure many of you see Amazon delivery vehicles in your communities, and we're committed to optimizing and transforming our transportation network through innovations in electrification, efficiency enhancements, and other alternative delivery methods. Across Massachusetts, we now have 340 electric delivery vehicles serving our customers and are actively working to expand that in 2025. So I know that most of you are probably not here to hear from me today. We have the great fortune in Massachusetts, and I can say that wholeheartedly now living in New York, that we have phenomenal public leaders who are so committed to solving hard problems and not just talking about them, but rolling up their sleeves to really get things done. I know you're all here today to hear from Mayor Michelle Wu. I cannot think of a better champion on climate. She's a leader on this issue, not just here in Boston, but globally. I watched Mayor Wu get her start back in the Menino administration, and I have been cheering her on ever since. So she's got a great team and is really, truly committed to this topic. So without further ado, I think Kate's going to come back up to formally introduce the mayor.
Thank you, Jen. So very quickly, because we're on a tight time frame. Okay, please, we're on a really tight timeline. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. Please. Thank you so much. Please take it outside. Let's move along. Thank you. Thank you. We're here today to hear from Mayor Michelle Wu. We'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, first I'd like to acknowledge and thank Susan Goldberg, who is, of course, joining us today to facilitate this Harborside chat. I think as many of you know, she is president and CEO of GBH, and she is, in fact, the first woman to serve in that role since it was founded in 1951. For all of you, Mayor Wu needs no introduction. I'm going to give her a quick one anyway. She is the first woman and first person of color to be elected to serve as the mayor of Boston. She's the daughter of immigrants, a Boston Public Schools mom, and an MBTA rider. And since day one, she has been a climate champion. In fact, in her first official act as mayor, she signed an ordinance divesting city funds from fossil fuels. And since then, her administration has hit the ground running and taken decisive action on a number of fronts. And we at A Better City are so grateful to partner with the Wu administration on a number of programs, from Birdo to the Power Corps Boston program. Many folks are in the room. Thank you. You're amazing. To various resilience efforts, the temperature sensor pilot program around extreme heat, and of course, our joint and, dare I say, dogged pursuit of a safe, affordable, reliable, decarbonized, and resilient MBTA. So under the mayor's leadership, I think it's fair to say in this venue that Boston is indeed becoming a beacon for climate action, justice, and innovation. So thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Mayor Wu, for being here. I'm so interested to talk with you about the role, excuse me, that cities can play as on the forefront of climate change, because there is so much to talk about. And, you know, Boston in particular is a place that there's some urgency to talk about this. Rising sea levels, neighborhoods that can flood even on sunny days. So there are a lot of scary ways to talk about climate change, especially for a local audience here. But how do you think that we can sort of connect quality of life issues to a discussion about climate change in a way that might engender a conversation that more people want to have?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you to Alex and the whole team for putting this together. The lights are really bright, so I can't exactly see who's in the audience, but shout out to Power Corps, who I see right in the front here, and so many of the leaders across all different sectors, and particularly our community partners. I think this question and the exact conversation of how do we make climate change real, tangible, and urgent for everyone is exactly what this room and so many of our community groups have been doing. It's about food, it's about water, and it's about clean air, all the things that you need for your family's life, being able to survive with the right temperature and not too hot, and being able to live in the healthiest, safest possible environment. But I think for me, it's also this element of, there's some intangible to it too, right? We often talk about it in such stark, scary terms. And you know, when I had the honor of joining the governor at a climate summit at the Vatican for some cities and states and countries represented around the world. And what I had shared with the crowd then was that for me, it really became real because, you know, I'm used to, as a mom, thinking about each season and what my kids need for this, right back to school. They got to get the longer pants or see if the hand-me-downs fit and this and that. And every winter it was, okay, can I remember ahead of time to buy the winter boots, because their feet grow so fast every year that they don't fit into what they were in last year. But this last winter was the first year where I didn't buy new boots because we didn't have, it was a couple years now, we didn't have the need to send them out with full snowstorms head to toe. And so we did have some times where it got really cold, and I was like, just curl your toes up and stare them in the boots. But that idea of what will it mean to lose the experience of going sledding in Boston, Right? What will it mean to lose the range of beauty in the world, the places that we hold most special to us, whether that's a beach, a mountainside, a tree, a park that you love, as so much is shifting all at once. I mean, much less to bring up the images that we see out of Florida, North Carolina, and entire communities gone. There's so much at stake, and I think we just have to find ways to connect it to what we feel most of all when we're talking about the people we love and the communities we belong to.
It's interesting because I was the editor of National Geographic for 8 years, where we covered all kinds of environmental issues, and tough ones too, species going extinct, natural habitats being destroyed. But I always thought climate change was the very toughest thing to cover because it seems so big and scary, and people feel helpless and hopeless and like they want to run screaming from the room. So do you think that has actually changed the way people are talking about it, that we're able to engage people in that conversation in a more positive way, in a more real-life way?
For better or worse, we're in a very different place in terms of widespread understanding of the problem. Or when I started on the council a little over a decade ago, and even before when I was in City Hall, when Jen and others were in the Menino administration, there wasn't a lot of discussion at all about climate being a problem. My older son was born, he's 9, about to turn 10, and so he has a December birthday. And I remember the year that he was born, December 2014, there were all these headlines. It felt new at that time that it was the hottest year on record, and we had tornadoes in different parts of the country and these weather events. And the idea that I was about to have a baby and the world was changing so fast that it was now the hottest on record, that was quite jarring and scary. And then he turned 1 year old, and we're at December the next year doing the look back again. Now we broke the record for hottest year on record again and again and again and again. So that basically his entire lifespan, we have lived the hottest years ever on record, and the wildfires and the weather events and all of the signs and signals that come along with it. So it's undeniable now, well, for most of us who believe in science, it is undeniable now. And that means we can have a different type of conversation about what to do about it. Not just, is this real? Is this something we need to think about? What do we do? And in Boston, we're trying to make that accessible to everyone. It's not just about taking measurements of emissions that you get every 2 years based on complicated calculations, although we're doing that too. It's jobs for our young people. It is food systems that we can connect to health and well-being. It's taking the investments into open space that will not only raise the berms and the barriers along the coastline, but create a beautiful new park for everyone to enjoy. And so I think we're again trying to connect it to daily life and making sure that it feels real.
So it was already mentioned that you were at that climate conference, and Governor Healy was there as well. And I know that people talked about you and Boston being in the forefront of a lot of these climate efforts. But when you were there, are there things that we can learn from what other cities globally? So Boston was the only U.S. city represented, but what can we learn from what cities are doing around the globe that perhaps we can, steal those good ideas for here?
Well, it was just a huge honor because we were the only American city invited to participate. The criteria had been either you're a community that is extremely impacted now by climate change, and or you're a community that has demonstrated enough leadership and innovation and progress that others from around the world would want to take you as an example. And Boston fit both categories. And so we had shared about the work that we're doing as a coastal city and all the various ways in our all-of-government approach. And particularly in the other cities that were represented in Africa and Asia and parts of Europe, it was so tangible, right? How they're changing their emergency response in parts of the world where it's now so hot and they hadn't had air conditioning in their ambulances before, but now that was making health conditions worse, even having to travel from where someone was receiving the care over to the hospital. They had to completely outfit all of their services from that lens of heat and what that was doing, or water and flooding, or food systems that are now threatened. So again, I think it's a similar message of we have to be all in and think about every piece of it, not just the small sliver that we tend to talk about in terms of climate. But I will say one insight that I had, I was there with scientists from around the world as well, just renowned folks on climate change. The first presentation we had was actually about how their strong belief is that it's now too late to stay within the threshold, right? We have that 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are past the point of being able to make that happen in terms of how fast emissions are still going up. And so they said, now the goal is, how do we make sure that we are bending the curve back down below the threshold as quickly as possible so it will be a temporary dip rather than irretrievable spinning out and all the cycles that will happen on top of it. And so that sense of urgency was palpable throughout everything we discussed. And then when they learned that I was an American, everyone, their first question was, why is the presidential election so close in your country? Like, help us understand this. And I tried my best, and they were like, why did the courts not just remove him from the ballot? And I kind of threw my hands up. But I realized that they were asking, and it was actually still related to climate. It was more than curiosity. It was the idea that when America is not seen as a global leader on pushing forward and fighting climate change, when we're looking to Pope Francis and fewer and fewer and fewer global leaders who are taking on this issue as the top focus for the future of our planet, it changes the landscape. And cities, more than ever, have an important role in that. And the eyes of the world really are on Boston.
You know, that's so interesting. In 2018, I interviewed Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, to talk about the environmental work that he was doing and how cities needed to be more resilient. And one of the points that he made was he thought that it wasn't really going to be federal governments that solved these problems. It was going to be cities and businesses. You want to talk a little bit maybe about the role that you think that businesses could play in solving this?
We, in Boston, for a number of years now, have had a collaboration called the Boston Green Ribbon Commission. Are there folks from GRC in the room? If you're a member, it's really, and it's broader than just the business sector. It's basically all of the largest employers in the city, anchor institutions that also include our universities and healthcare institutions and others. And the idea is that we need tangible examples, and each one of us on the city side, the state side, and these institutions, the utility companies are part of it too, can accelerate things by just doing them and then sharing those best practices everywhere. So there's an element of how do we prove that things are working faster and faster by leaning on the institutions that have more resources to be able to do that. We are in, for example, the first LEED Platinum certified office or high-rise in New England in this very building. I just came from a ribbon cutting with Car Gurus, who has moved into the Air Rights building over the Mass Pike. Again, celebrating their energy efficiency and climate standards in that building. And so we can pass laws all we want. We can create programs. But until that actually reaches residents through places of employment, through community organizations, through the day-to-day ways that our economy is tied into people's options and choices and behaviors, that's how we take it from legislation to culture to community.
So I want to talk for a second about the power to change things. I mean, as mayor, you've got obviously a lot of power over how the city runs, but you don't have endless power. You lack control of some big issues that because the power is held by the legislature or the state government, and the transportation system is one of those things. In fact, when you were at the climate conference at the Vatican, you said, I look with envy upon other cities that can just decide where they need to add new stations or stops. It's a fractured system. So, all right, given that, and I don't know if that can change or not, but how do you work within that system to make change in the time in which it needs to be changed?
Well, we have to be very clear about what is entirely within the city's purview, and then maximizing everything that we can possibly do on our own, we are trying to do. That means putting in place ordinances like the Boston Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance that use our legal authority to impact the largest buildings, which account for 40% of, it's something like 10 to 15% of the actual buildings account for more than 40% of the emissions. And so those are the largest ones that we are able to provide parameters and guidelines to ensure they're meeting the standards that we've set forward. We're working to provide resources for affordable housing, energy retrofits, pursuing every possible way that we can partner with community organizations on that, creating jobs and making sure that we're building in that win-win for everyone with the workforce development pipeline as well. And then I do want to say, this has been a particular moment, and I know we're counting down to the presidential election, and that better go how it needs to go. But under this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and the Healy-Driscoll administration, we've had this remarkable alignment between city, state, and federal government, where Massachusetts has now gotten more grant funding than ever before, where the legislation, whether it's American Rescue Plan or bipartisan infrastructure law or some of these other major pieces of legislation that have created grant opportunities, it has, to apply for a grant, you need to have a set of advocates who can influence that. And our congressional delegation, our senators, our state, they are known nationally as having that kind of influence and impact. But you also need to have the proposal and the plan that is trusted to be able to just get going right away. And so much of what the city has been doing for many years is laying out clear plans, doing the planning, putting in the work ahead of time so that we would be first in line as soon as those larger funding opportunities opened up. And now we're seeing, we've gotten grants that are bigger than ever before on green jobs and workforce collaborative across the public-private sector to place residents into those jobs, on growing our urban tree canopy with our forestry plan, which we had put in place, and the U.S. Forest Service providing funding, again, through the advocacy efforts of our state and federal delegations to get that going in addition. So we've been ready, and whether it's heat, flooding, open space, resilience, coastal resilience in particular, we are one of the only cities that has a plan mapped out for all 47 miles of coastline of what exactly we need to do. And we may not have all the funding lined up, but having that planning done, having the community outreach done ahead of time means that we can be at the very front of the line when we find any resource possible.
So I know you've been working really hard to cut back on the carbon emissions, and buildings represent a huge opportunity to do that. Buildings, I didn't realize this, represent 71% of the community's carbon emissions, which is just crazy. Doing something about new buildings is a big opportunity. So your first idea, which was to take part in this state pilot program, that kind of got scuttled by the state. The second idea, to try that again, was thwarted by the zoning commission. So is there a plan C?
That one is still in progress, so I wouldn't say it's been thwarted. We are continuing on that track and not giving up. I think there are benefits and challenges of being the center city in Massachusetts. It means we have resources, we have a center of gravity, we can get attention on the good things that are happening here, but there also can be a lot of concern that if all of Boston moves, are we suddenly going too fast? And so it was quite frustrating when a program set up for 10 communities across the state to do their own regulations around decarbonization was explicitly framed so that Boston should not and would not be the ones selected from that. We are going to get there through any other pathway. And we're going to continue to advocate to lift that cap of 10 communities. There's no way that if we want to meet our goals, we can limit and slow down the experimentation, the progress, the work that has to happen. And I understand that there are concerns about what the interaction can be between continuing to grow our economy and whether there are all these changes can be confusing or slow things down or add additional costs. I think the part of the point of this convening is really to show that some of the previously held ideas about things being impossible because they're too expensive are actually no longer in effect. And once you know and have access to those technologies, the cost differential shrinks down or may not be there at all. And so having our ability to be at the forefront of setting regulations that make sense, that match the urgency of our communities, is our way of also shaping the market, and we can't shy away from being in that role of working with our communities, including the business community stakeholders, to really identify how we move as quickly as possible.
So let's talk for a second again about the business community. I mean, we just had a demonstration right here in front of us about how one business is managing this issue, and some disagreement about that. There was a lot of conversation here that with people saying, but we're actually all on the same side. How does that get litigated, if you will? And I don't mean in a court. How does that get litigated in the court of public opinion?
I think, the beauty of my job is that every day I get to see the full range of how many pieces there are, how many people, how many communities have to come together for something to form this amazing symphony of our democracy or our city or some initiative that we're rolling out. And we don't want to be a community that says you can't disagree and you shouldn't be in spaces where you're going to uncomfortably sometimes push the larger group to think about how to move faster, to challenge that. That is actually an absolutely crucial and essential part of our democratic system and of getting us to open our eyes and move as quickly as possible. I feel this tension all the time within the city as well, right? Moving from a city council role where your primary focus is advocacy, is highlighting, is just trying to push, and now 3 years in of being the ones to have to reconcile, well, how do we pay for it? How do we make sure that it happens and isn't just an announcement or a ribbon cutting, but it's a lasting program that can be sustained and continue having impact over the long run. Sometimes it can feel like we need to slow down to move faster in the long run. And I think all that, my big takeaway is that transparency is the most important thing, right? We have to be clear. Absolutely. I'm not even satisfied with the pace of the city's goals. Technically, we still have 2050 goals on the books for the city of Boston, which just makes me cringe because by 2050, we won't potentially be around to be having this conversation in terms of how far the climate debate would have gotten. And so rather than take all of our energy and say we're going to redo all our goals and move them from 2050 to 45 or 40 or whatever it is, we have said we're focusing on the next 5 years. We're going to pick the actionable steps we can take for our current climate plan that will run through 2030 and make that as ambitious, as fast, and as uncomfortable for us as possible so that we know we are getting something done in the short run. And that's a little bit of a tension, right? It's sort of where are you putting your focus? How do you make things happen? And each one of us, whether in the private sector, the public sector, or philanthropy or a nonprofit, we have to live with this idea that it's too late to do things comfortably and conveniently, and whether that challenge can come from inside or comes from outside, I try to find the kernel in it that is about how do we translate that into actual movement and progress.
So what do you think is the hardest thing on the horizon that you're going to have to do around climate?
It's just the scale of how to manage. I mean, everyone always talks about, building a plane while you're flying it. I don't know that that's exactly the right metaphor, but the sense is that there's so much we have to change about systems, about underlying processes that are so complicated, while we're also having things flow through those systems every single day, right? New buildings are getting proposed and approved and permitted in Boston every day. And we need those to continue moving through because we need housing units for our residents to be able to afford. We need the city to be growing and not just say we're pausing everything until we can take the time to redo all our systems. And so that push and pull of how do we know where we're going to end up, push ourselves to move that even sooner, and then still, in the meantime, find ways to make the transition possible. That how do we get from point A to point B is the trickiest part. And in our city, most of the easy things, the low-hanging fruits, already been done, right? The places where it was easy to fix some open space or to change the road infrastructure, we basically have been moving through those in the last couple of years. Now we're at the hard stuff. The stuff that really gets people talking about, well, am I going to lose money over this? And is my community going to feel like we are having to completely change how we interact with a certain roadway over this? And in those instances, we just have to lean in even more. And again, what is transparency around where we're headed, what the endpoint and goal is, and how do we map out a path to get there that works in everyone's various points of view.
So obviously that is huge. How do you get people to make that leap? How do you get them to agree to do something that might not be in their immediate self-interest? Well, how do you?
Well,
Because I personally would like to know.
when I I had just had my second son, so this must have been a little over 7 years ago. I went on a trip with the Boston Green Ribbon Commission to Northern Europe, and we looked at infrastructure. It was Copenhagen, Rotterdam, and several of the cities in that area. And I can't remember if it was Amsterdam or I can't remember exactly where, but we were talking about how they build new infrastructure, even if it involves taking away parking, for example, and how they then make it possible for people to use transportation that is sustainable, healthy, et cetera. And I asked the question when we were with city planners, well, don't your residents get angry when you're going to make a change that affects what they see in front of their homes or in their neighborhoods? And they said, oh yes, of course, people don't like it when they lose parking, but they believe that when the government takes on a project, it is for the greater good. And I was like, what? We are a little bit far from that sentiment in the country right now. There's a lot of deeply deserved mistrust of government built up over decades of lived experience, broken promises, and disparities that have been created through policy. And so I think our role is, we can't fix everything immediately, but we can, at the city level, move relatively quickly to identify the places where we can prove that progress is possible if we just keep everyone at the table. And it's never going to be 100% agreement, but if we can take a step and then ask for feedback, how did that go? What could we have done better? What was the process feeling like? Rather than doing something, then disappearing and going on to the next thing. I keep telling my team, it's less about managing through each project or each program we're trying to do, and more about being in relationship, in constant, full relationship with community members.
All right, one last question. What is the one thing that you would like everybody in Boston to do to make a difference when it comes to climate?
I think there are lots of individual things that, we have a composting program, we have recycling, we have different things that please check out our website and get involved with everything you can possibly take advantage of. But I think for me, the biggest underlying issue is that even though we all know it matters, even though we all experience it, even though we mostly know what we need to do, it still does not rise up to the level of the most talked about or publicly pressured issues when it comes to policy making. I mean, numerous debates that happen at the presidential or vice presidential level that don't mention climate at all, right? And at the local level, even one person, five people, 10, 50 people reaching out to your local city councilor, state rep, state senator, mayor, it makes a difference in how our elected government thinks about what matters to our communities. And everything is grounded in people's individual stories. That's what actually creates the momentum to change things. So whatever venue, whatever slice of the climate world you care most about, finding ways to do what you're doing, but also push in election cycles for this to be part of the conversation. Push at public meetings for it to be connected to the housing development that's being proposed or the new business that's opening up. There's a climate connection to everything that we're doing, and I think we just need to be more public and be more united in forcing this to be a priority for our community right now.
Well, Mayor Michelle Wu, thank you so much for being here today, for talking with us.